Alright, so onto the deck list. So for the monsters, I played 3 Ice Bell, 2 Glass Bell, and a Snow Bell. That's your standard 6 Wind Witches to make your Crystal Wing. And you play the second Glass Bell because later in the game you can do the same play just without your Snow Bell and go into a level 7 Synchro, typically your Clear Wing, which is pretty good in this format. So that's 6 Wind Witches. Then for the Invoked, I played the 3 Alistair, so that's all there is. And for the Artifacts, I played 2 Scythe and 1 Moral Talk. I was playing 3 Scythe in the Moral Talk, but I was drawing into the Artifacts too much, so I cut the Scythe, but I wanted to keep the Moral Talk as you're not always going to draw your Sanctum before your opponent establishes a board. And so that way you have more versatility and you can break boards with your Sanctum. In a different deck that doesn't rely so much on the artifacts, like when you splash the engine into like Zoo, you don't need the Moral Talk, but in this one, I really think you should play it. Then for hand traps, it was 2 Maxi and 2 Ghost Ogre. I know Ghost Ogre is seeing less play, but this is a deck where you want hand traps as you can discard them and then fuse with them with your Invocation and Grave, so they have extra utility, and Ghost Ogre is still a pretty good card. So that's 16 monsters total. For the spells, I was playing 3 Meltdown and 2 Terraforming. I'm not playing 3 Terraforming because it's not really a card you want to draw into after you get your Alistair loop going. The same goes for Meltdown, but Terraforming is sort of worse. And the reason is you would much rather see traps or quick plays or something else to keep your board and keep your flow going rather than just getting more ways to get the Alistair that you're already going to be recycling. So essentially your trade-off is a slight less probability of opening an Alistair play, however your grind game becomes a little better, and I think that's worth it as that's essentially how this deck wins. I was playing 2 Terraforming, 2 Invocation, and that's because 1 is not enough when D-Barrier exists. They flip it on you and your Invocation goes to grave, you can't recycle your Alistair, and then your plays are shut off. But you don't want 3 because it's searchable, and you'd much rather actually search it off of the Alistair than draw into it. Played 2 Wonderwand. I only played 2 because Wonderwand is a card that you don't want to open multiples of, as even if you resolve 1, you probably won't be resolving the other one, and in that case, there are other cards you would rather play. It is really good as it lets you draw into 2 new cards, but it requires you equipping it to a monster, that monster surviving, essentially a Dryden Pop or whatever it may be, and then tributing it. So I'd rather just have the 2 so you can still play it without clogging on it. Double Twin Twister, as back row is very prominent and this deck is very susceptible to disruption. Essentially, Dimensional Barrier is heavily played right now, but with the Twin Twister being able to hit 2 back row, mean even if you do hit the barrier, you'll probably hit a strike or something else, and it forces them to use the barrier, call either fusion or synchro, and then you can just do the opposite play after that. I played Double Chalice as it's extremely versatile, and one of the main ways or easiest ways for Zoo to get rid of your Crystal Wing that's indestructible via Snowbell is attach a Viper to your whatever Exceed it may be, bait out Crystal Wing's effect, and then attack into it and banish it. But with the Chalice, you can just damage step, negate the Whiptail's effect, and then you get to keep your Crystal Wing. Finally, I played a Regeki. Although this is a going first deck, Regeki is a massive blowout, and it's really, really powerful in a deck like this where you can't necessarily get over huge monsters very easy, or huge boards. So 14 spells. Then for traps, I played triple Sanctum for the artifacts, triple Barrier, triple Strike. I was originally playing 2 Strike and 1 Warning. However, I decided to take the Warning out for the Strike, as Strike is still decent for a trap card going second. It will allow you to break an established board, while Warning cannot. However, Warning can stop Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, but I've noticed that people aren't playing Kaijus in the main nearly as much, so I'd rather have the versatility that Strike offers. Finally, I played 2 Storming Mirror Force. I could have played Vanities or Compulse or Torrent. However, I wanted the Storming Mirror Force because people don't expect it as much as they did really not too long ago. And this allows you to remove a lot of monsters at once while protecting your monsters, which is important so you can just continue to spam out fusions and not run out of resources. At the same time, it's also decent going second because if you can't get your plays through, you can set it and you're relatively safe from dying essentially that turn. That's 11 traps, bringing it to 41 cards. So for the extra deck, I played the 1 Zenmayo. You can combo it with your Raiden, who's a level 5 and an artifact. Raiden will Book of Moon a monster. Then you go into Zenmayo and you can pop that monster. You can also get rid of back row or whatever. It didn't actually come up, but theoretically it's good, and I felt safe having it in there for just random situations where big monsters you can't get over terribly easily. So for synchros, I played 2 Clearwing Synchro Dragon. I'm proxying 1 as I borrowed it from a friend, but the reason I played 2 is because I don't play the Windwitch Winterbell, as its burn effect is good, but it's susceptible to Ghost Ogre. And if you do get it Ghost Ogred when you're trying to synchro up into your Crystal Wing, you can't make the Crystal Wing anymore. And because I never used that effect, I figured I'd rather have 2 Clear Wings just in case you need to for random situations, as it's a little bit better than the Winterbell in this meta overall. Of course, I played the 1 Crystal Wing, and then for my last synchro I played an Omega. Omega overall is a really good synchro, but the main reason I played it is because if you get your Alistair chain disappearanced, you run into the issue of not having a grinding game anymore, and you have to rely on artifacts and your Wind Witches to go through, resolve, and win you the game. So I figured if I can stun with a Scythe for a turn, normal summon a Ghost Ogre, synchro the 2 into Omega, and then on your opponent's standby phase, Omega affects putting one of your banished Alistairs from the chain disappearance back into your graveyard, turning your invocations back on. Alternatively, if your opponent uses, DD Crow, Lancia, Dimensional Barrier to get all of your invocations and put them in grave without banishing an Alistair, you can make the Omega with Alistair and a Glass Spell, assuming you don't use Glass Spell's effect to lock you into wins. And you can sync for him, and when he does die, he can shuffle himself and an invocation back into the deck, turning your engine back on. It's relatively situational, however, I did summon it quite a few times actually, not even for those purposes, but stealing cards from hand and getting information from your opponent is really good. For fusions, I played the Dark, the Water, and I did play him too, but the Fire. They're all good for, Infernoid and Paleo, so you want to play them just to have them at the very least. I then played 2 of the Earth. The idea was in Zoo, you need to grind a lot, so I wanted the 2 of the Earth so I could get rid of names from their graves so they can't use combo, and obviously banish a rat so they can't do a full rat combo. However, I realized typically after banishing 1 rat, you don't need to make another one simply because their grind game is lessened. So I wish in the end that I actually played a Stardust over him. Most people do, and that's definitely correct because your Wind Witch combo will get interrupted a lot, and you won't be able to make a Crystal Wing, but you can use an Alistair, the Snowbell, and the Ice Bell to sync for a level 8 wind, which Stardust would be the best one. I also played 2 Mechaba. You don't really need the third, as it's a card I want to save for like a mid-game when my opponent doesn't have full resources, as it's easier to lock them out of playing when they don't have access to, starting hand with 6 cards in it. And then finally, 3 of the Raiden, simply because the Book of Moon effect is very good to get over problem monsters, prevent plays. Currently in the metagame, I think he's the best invoked, and probably will be after the Forbidden Limited list takes effect. Finally, for the side deck, I played a 5-card Kaiju engine, and that's because I didn't want to play 7, as I wanted more space in my side deck for other cards. And I played these 3 specifically as light, fire, and wind are really relevant attributes for your invoked fusion monsters, and it also allows you to get over all of them with your Raiden, as they all have less than 2200 defense, so you can flip them down and attack over them if you hard draw them. Going second, I would always side out my artifact engine, and I would side in these 5 cards plus the invocation. And I sided the 3rd invocation as a sort of a soft counter side. Most people will try to stop your grind game by DD Crowing, Lancing, or using Dimensional Barrier on your invocation. So the 3rd copy allows you to basically use 2 or attempt to use your first 2, and then you have the 3rd one to search and continue your plays. I played 2 DD Crow and 3 Lancia, as they're good against Infernoid, and the Crow is good against Paleo. Those are pretty bad matchups for you, and they're overall generically pretty good this format. Played double MST. The reason was that I wanted more spell and trap destruction. I wanted cards I could chain against the Paleos so they can't summon their Paleos from grave, while also having an out to Iron Wall, as Iron Wall sticks on the field and it really, really hurts the deck. So, which is also why I didn't play Cosmic Cyclone, as you can't banish an Iron Wall. Finally, the last 2 cards were 2 Chain Disappearance. It's just a very good card against all the meta decks right now, hitting Rat, hitting Decatron, hitting Alistair even. You can hit some frogs too. That can be good. So that's the 15 card side. And then finally, for the upcoming format, the core engines of this deck are really not affected by the list. So besides your Max C, you don't really have much you need to replace. However, all of your trap cards are very dependent on what the metagame looks like, and so you just have to adjust those to counter whatever the current best decks are. Overall, Paleo and Infernoid I expect to see a lot more of, and those are both not very good matchups, so you need to main deck cards accordingly, such as a Warning, as it's pretty good against both of those decks, and whatever other techs you want to play to counter the current meta. So finally, I want to thank Chris for allowing me to put this on his channel, and I would also like to thank my friends Justin, Josh, and Chris for loaning me cards, for testing with me, and for discussing theory. And I'd like to thank all of you for sticking through with all of this and watching this, so thank you very much.